Our first speaker is going to be the very excellent Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Tom Watson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are enjoying the Labour Party conference as much as I am. And I see we have a mix of people from Sandwell, as well as delegates and people from the industry. So I'm not going to give the bullet-pointed speech my team have given me. I'm just going to do a couple of things. Firstly, just to talk a little bit about the journey that has brought the party to this position where we launched a sort of new policy on gambling at our last week, and what the framework going forward is going to be. I first started getting interested in gambling regulation when I visited Australia and bumped into a guy at a reception who told me about Australian pokies and how they were creating gambling addiction in ways we'd never understood before, and that this epidemic of gambling addiction was about to hit Britain because the 2005 Gambling Act had created the conditions where people could put fixed odds betting terminals into bookies. And I'm ashamed to say I was horrified to hear that, because I had been a junior whip doing his first bill on the 2005 Gambling Act, and I remember a very vague conversation about licence regimes, but the argument on the bill was all about super casinos, and some of you will remember the Daily Mail campaign on casinos. We didn't talk about foxes. But there I was, going back to West Bromwich every week to do surgeries, go home, and I couldn't work out why we were seeing more and more betting shops. And other MPs started saying to me, well, the newer MPs were saying they've got dozens and dozens and dozens of betting shops, and then one of them told me that they'd even converted a Burger King into a betting shop, and I realised that we got a problem. And I raised a question in the House, and it was like the roof fell in. Firstly, the industry were just savage, utterly dismissive that there was a problem. And then this organisation called the Campaign for Fairer Gambling turned up, and this rather troublesome young organiser called Matt Zodd started talking to me, and he is a troublemaker, and I love him for it. He won't like me saying this, but he's banned from the Labour Party from the Tory Party conference. Nothing to do with the campaign, and I've probably just ruined his career by saying that. And we started to talk, and there's a journey when people resist change. Firstly, they genuinely did ignore us, and then they did ridicule and mock us, and then they did attack us, and then they realised we were serious. And without the sort of leadership of Matt in that campaign, and the indefatigable Caroline Harris, MP, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party in Wales, we would not have got the government to do something they really didn't want to do. But we had a win from opposition, and the country will be a better place for it. But of course that got me looking more widely at where I think there are holes in current regulation, holes in legislation, where as a society we've got to try and work out what's going on. And the basic problem is that 2005 Gambling Act is not fit for purpose. Since then there's been an explosion of digital products that allow people to gamble in different and new ways that are changing the way people can lose money, but also changing the way our culture exists. So, for example, if you look at most kids now who watch telly, football on the telly, they're growing up to think they need a financial stake in the outcome of a football match to be proper fans. We launched a policy last week where we called for the ban on in-game advertising, whistle-to-whistle ban on betting, and I've been inundated with emails and tweets and comments on social media from parents who talk about 8-year-old kids talking about the betting odds of Messi getting the first goal in a game. Right? It's not how I remember growing up. I remember my dad putting a bet on, going out on a Saturday morning, putting a couple of bets on, and then coming back, and if he'd win, he'd spend a bit more down the pub that night. I don't remember us being glued to the screens, you know, pressing your phone every time there's a new bet that comes up. So, and actually we've been very pleasantly surprised by how the industry have responded positively. I think everybody knows there's a reputational issue here. And if you believe in responsible gambling, and you believe in fairer gambling, and you believe in corporate social responsibility, then when there is market failure or a failure in regulation, it's important for a party that believes in the empowering state to act. And I hope we're working with the industry now so that they know that we're serious and that they can come up with their own solutions to where they identify problems. There are other things we found out in the course of this journey, and thank you to those of you that contributed to the reform. We found out that there are too many people who use credit cards to do online bets. You shouldn't have to go into debt. You shouldn't go into debt if you're going to lay a bet. If you're going to put a bet on, you basically should be prepared to lose the money, and you shouldn't have to worry about paying your debts back on that. So we're going to ban credit card betting. And we've been very pleasantly surprised that lots of the industry sort of accept that as well. And there are, and the banking system has got to play a role as well. In the taxonomy of financial transactions, it is possible for banks to allow citizens to self-exclude, to say to their bank, look, I've got a credit card, I've got a debit card, I'm worried about problem gambling, please don't let me use them for any gambling problems. You can stop a problem at source. And the significance of that is, it's everyone playing their role, including the banking sector, which has enabled these explosion of digital products with online bets, to make sure that gambling addicts and problem gamblers aren't forced into temptation. And there should be a flip side to that as well. I don't think if you've got a gambling problem and you're brave enough to go to your bank to say, please don't exclude me, that should affect your credit rating. And the banking sector should be involved in ensuring that. So we're going to, those are the kind of things we're going to do. And the devil now will be in the implementation. After a year's review, what I want to see the next Labour government do is implement regulatory and or legislative change, not just in the first term of a Labour government, but in the first parliamentary session of a Labour government. And so our task ahead is now big, because what that means we've actually got to do the detailed work for implementation. I want an off-the-shelf plan that on day one of Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for DCMS can go to Parliament and say, here's a bill we want enacted. It's going to be quite hard because there's a lot of technical detail in there, but that's where I want us to be. And I want the Labour Party to do everything it can in the run-up to that to force the government to implement some of the suggestions for change that we've made. Because if Theresa May takes us to 3 more years, there are going to be many millions more people in this country that are affected by a failure of regulation as it stands. You know, let me just go back to the starting point that started me on this journey. The Gambling Commission tell us there are 430,000 gambling addicts in this country. 25,000 of them are 16 or under. And there are 2 million people sitting behind that 500,000 who have problem gambling, who could slip into gambling addiction. And all of us here, particularly the counsellors who've had surgeries, we've seen families destroyed by gambling addiction. And that's a blight on a community. It can stop someone, people can lose their jobs, and they can even slip into crime and go to prison as they're chasing the next bad debt. As socialists, we don't want to see that. We want people to be able to enjoy recreational gambling like we pictured it when we were kids. And we want to make sure that people are not exploited. And without the work of you in this room, without the work of Carolyn and Matt and the Campaign for Fairer Gambling, we wouldn't be anywhere near that now. But I think we're on the cusp of change and rebalancing the market in gambling in Britain for good. And I'd just like to thank you all for being part of that.